On this episode of a Soul's Quest podcast, Omar and I discuss the challenges of relationship changes and how to navigate these changes and challenges with resilience. Stay tuned. Hey.
Welcome to another episode. How are you?
Good. A little tired. So if you see me,
Don't yawn. That's not
I'm going to
cool.
try not to.
Why? You got to bring energy into this. Don't give me that look. See? And hence, we're talking about relationship challenges right
Yes, exactly.
now.
You're challenging me right now. And I don't appreciate it. You're the night person. I'm the day person.
Yes.
So,
Okay. So I guess we need to compromise and record in the middle of the afternoon.
okay, let's do that.
Perfect.
So next time we record earlier.
There we go.
Okay.
There
All
we
right.
go.
Not sure. Okay.
All right. Look at that. With conflict, we resolved the conflict. We came up with solutions. Perfect.
We came up with a solution. We didn't give
We
away.
listened.
We didn't give away. We listened. Yes, these are all
Yes.
the things that we're going to be talking about today.
Exactly. So look
that's
at that.
Very,
that
very good.
just
See, we
worked.
just gave the perfect.
just-
It was a real life example, people.
That was
we
a
weren't
real
playing.
No, we were not playing.
That could have gone bad.
That would have gone bad. Anyways, go on.
That was good. That was
Yeah,
good.
that was really good.
Impromptu little
Impromptu little
conflict
resolution right there. Relationship conflict resolution.
So we are talking about relationships and changes and the challenges associated with relationships, and we're not just talking about marital relationships. We're talking about your spouse, your partner, your coworkers,
Yeah.
children, family members. Talking about all that.
Yeah.
All of that.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is one of those broad topics, right? Because we are social beings, right? And we always are in what do you call it? Interacting with other people, and sometimes those interactions, I think it's natural that you are not, it's natural. We don't. Two people don't see the world in the exact same way. It's impossible. So when that happens, it's just the nature of our being. So conflict, challenges, or a little bit of friction, it's always like a natural occurrence. So you have to be able to navigate through that.
Yeah. I think having conflict, and I think having disagreements and not seeing things the same keeps things sort of flavorful or spicy, so to speak, instead of vanilla. Because if you and I
but I like a mild spicy.
I get that. I don't know what you're implying or who you're talking about.
No. I'm just saying. I just like a mild spicy.
I like a mild spicy too.
Okay.
By the way, just FYI,
Okay.
just so you know where we're coming from here.
All
okay,
right,
I see
all right.
you.
All right.
But I think that having a little bit, having different perspectives about things is a healthy thing.
It's important.
It's about
actually.
how we go about navigating that, and that's what we're talking about resilience, is what makes the difference. You know what I mean? Because we are individuals, and we all have different tastes and desires and likes and dislikes and whatnot. And I think what happens is when we disrespect another individual, and I would say disrespect is a good way to put that.
Yes.
Then, because if you're not appreciating their point of view, then you're not showing respect. You're showing a disrespect if you're going to be argumentative about something or combative or.
And this is what I've personally have come across with. I'm a very passionate person when it comes to like arguing a point or
Yes.
or sharing my opinions.
Yes.
Right. About a topic or something like that. I'm very passionate about that.
Yes.
Right. And a lot of people can't handle that because they confuse passionate with me putting them down. But I never use disrespectful words to other people like, oh, you're an idiot. It's like, what are you talking about? It's
Even
like,
though sometimes you really want to.
yeah, but it's like, and
You
that's
don't.
the part that most people are not. I don't know if it's resilient enough or because we could disagree on our stuff, right? But when you start calling people, oh, you're too sensitive. Oh, you're too much this. Oh, you're too much that. It's like that's when you lose that civil discourse because you could be passionate about your point, and make an argument about it without having to be disrespectful. And this is one of the things that we're seeing in our society right now. And that's why there's so many fractured relationships on a societal macro level for the inability of disagreeing with someone without having to call somebody an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody like, you need to be canceled or things like that, because it's a matter of understanding and perspective. But yeah.
I agree.
Pretty
so I
interesting.
do have 2 quotes.
Mm-hmm.
So the first is by Brene Brown. We all know how I feel about Brene Brown. She says that only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light.
Yeah, I love
like
that quote.
Yeah, isn't that a good quote?
You gotta fight your shadow. You gotta fight your shadow.
I knew you'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
For that reason, yeah.
Because
you have to be able to dig down into the muck and dirty, nasty stuff and really try to combat.
I will say
to come out on the other side.
It's to combat it, to integrate it, because it is a part of you. You have to be able to understand it.
Understand it.
You got to give it its due.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then integrate it, which is a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yep.
And then the other one is by Iyanla Van Sant. I don't know why I butcher her name no matter what, but she was like a really like a avid person with Oprah at one point, right?
Okay.
And she talks about it from a familial perspective, which is family is supposed to be our safe place. Very often it's where we find the deepest heartache. And that is the truth. How many times have you talked to somebody and they're like, Thanksgiving was the worst thing ever because families can't be together and there's discourse and discontent and frustrations and anger and disagreeing and they don't respect each other's points of view. Like like football is a big deal. How many people end up fighting it out and stuff over these things, and it's like, and they're family.
Yeah, I mean, and that's I think that's you go back like Cain and Abel and things like that. The jealousy, the treatment, and I think it's because we're so close in those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That the expectation is that because we are so close, that things should be much better. Right. But sometimes it just doesn't work out like that, because again, even when you're that close, think about the people that you work with, and you're close with those people because you spend a lot of time in there. Right. But there's jealousy, there's envy, there's anger, there's gossip, there's this, there's that. It's like, why does that person get this and why don't I get this?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in a family structure. That is kind of like one of those things that is a potential to happen, and the idea is to be able to deal with those, because in a family you have different types of personalities too.
Oh yeah.
And just because you have a standard, or you have like a matriarch or a patriarch or both or whatever it is that you have, and your parents set values and all that stuff, it doesn't always mean that people will follow those, because people have to find their own ways.
Right.
So that's like the nature of the conflict. And is within the acceptance of that reality that it's easier to navigate things.
Yeah, and I think keep taking things into perspective, like knowing that relationships evolve. They're always in flux.
Yes.
They're always evolving. Things happen to people on a different different rates. Some people achieve things at different times. This applies to all relationships. This isn't just family relationships or spouses or partners or whatnot. So it's when you're going through changes and you're going through different circumstances, it's not uncommon to be confronted with conflict or challenges or difficult conversations. And I think that that's important to recognize. And when you know that, you already got one tool in your tool bag, because you know that, you know what I mean?
It's interesting, because this is one of the, I think from my point of view, from my experiences, what I've seen, it's parents, right? Mm-hmm. And like parents don't think that the kids are going to talk back to them. It's inevitable, right? Because cyclically speaking, when a child becomes to become an adolescent, right?
That's what they do.
That's what they do.
Talk back.
but it makes sense. And the reasons being because their psychological needs at that moment in time, as they go in becoming an adolescence, is to transition into a more independent individual, right? So obviously, if you're trying to hold this person back, right, from becoming what the natural process is of them becoming more self-reliant,
yes,
then you're doing yourself a disservice. You're making it more difficult on yourself.
Yeah.
But it's like, you're my child, you need to do what I tell you.
Yeah.
Instead of kind of like talking and say, okay, you're going through some changes.
Yeah.
I understand your need for self-reliance. But there's this thing called choices and consequences.
Yes.
right?
And that's the discussion. But I think in those moments, it's that we talk about fight or flight. What happens is we go from 0 to 100 as a parent.
Yeah.
Or even as a coworkers, in relationships, we go from 0 to 100, and everything in the middle doesn't matter. It's what, you know what I mean? And so that's what we're talking about in this episode, is how to navigate that and build resilience in overcoming those challenges. Because that's one of the biggest things, is that we're so reactive as a society that we go from 0 to 100, and at 100, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Especially with our children, because we want to assert that parental sort of control. I can name a number of times when my kids talked back to me and I was just like, I don't know who you think you're talking to, but I'm not the one. I will bust your face or whatever, something silly. Yeah.
Yikes.
I'm a Caribbean woman.
So let's compartmentalize different
That's
things.
Bad. I just said something about all Caribbean women. I didn't mean it like that.
That's
Sorry.
very stereotypical.
Talking about me.
It's all right. So let's compartmentalize this couple of things, right? Okay. Let's first start talking about familiar relationships, right?
Okay, let's do that.
In familiar relationships, you have the caretaker, their child or children, whatever, right? So you have...
That's one aspect.
Right? And then you have the siblings, right? That's another aspect, right? So the purpose of all that, right? All the idea behind it is a relationship of caretaker to child, right? And the role of the caretaker is to provide. So a lot of the stuff that happens with the caretaker is well intentioned.
Yeah.
Right? It's because they want to protect, they want to care, they want to do all that stuff, right? Now, but it comes a point, because of our cyclical nature as we evolve as human beings from childhood, right? From early childhood to adolescence, it's that our needs change. If a parent maintains a caretaking mentality without making that transition of understanding, okay, this child is changing, I no longer need to take care of them as we need to, as when they were younger, because now they need a different type of guidance, right? If you fail to do that, that's when a part of the conflict comes about.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Because as the adult, if you don't see that change, then it becomes problematic.
That was some of the issues that you had with your own mom.
Of course,
right?
of course.
Is that she wanted to continue to treat you as you were at this level, but you had moved into a different level, but she was still here.
Precisely.
And that was some of the conflict. Thank God you guys were able to work those things out and talk about it.
We were able to understand it, right? And there was a lot of friction and a lot of yelling and arguing, but the idea is that you have to be able to, again, and we're going to come back to the idea of confronting the situation rather than sweeping it under the rug or avoiding it or just blowing up. You have to be able to confront it and talk about it. Right, but
even if it's uncomfortable,
exactly. But even as a caretaker, and I think this is one of the issues that we have as caretakers and parents, because we care so much, is that we fail to recognize the need to allow the people that we're caring for, to to project and go from one stage to the next, and we have to be able to understand that, and that's a hard thing. Because your identity as a caretaker is tied up to that child, right? I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm this is who I am to this person. So if this person goes, then I'm no longer that.
Yeah. Then what am I?
So you have to be able to redefine that part, right? So, and that's when you feel the challenge, because how do I define who I am anymore since I'm no longer this?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to hold on to that person for them to do what I want them to do, right? Because they define who I am. They got to pick the certain career. They got to be like this. They got to behave in this way. And I think we're going to do another episode more in detail on that transition, right? But it's kind of like important to be able to showcase that, right? So that's number one. So compartmentalizing the familiar stuff. And then you have the siblings, right? And then you got into a big different thing, because you got the first, you talk about one kid gets more attention than the other, this and that and the other, blah, 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 blah. And you got those type of conflicts and those type of perceptions, and the idea is that even though you have two kids in the household, those two kids are two completely different individuals with two completely different personalities. Like you just invited two different strangers into your household.
Well, I don't know about inviting, but well, I guess you did purposefully. Yeah. Okay. Let's not go there. Okay.
You know, So you have these two individuals, and then it's like, what's equal and fair? Treating them both the same, or being able to have different strokes for different folks, right? So it's like all this stuff is things that you have to be cognizant of and aware of when you're looking at these different things, because you might and there's parents that say, well, I punish this kid and it's like nothing to them. But I punish this one, it's like the world is going to come to an end. So what's the point? What's the point of treating them both the same? You know, so it's a lot of work in those relationships. So then you could start seeing as people grow, the challenges of communicating, the challenges of you wanting to assert your authority over this individual because you know what's best for them, without letting them realize it's like they might have to figure out what is best for them too. But I'll be there to guide them. Right?
Yeah.
That's one part.
Yeah. And then what about, since you're talking about this, what about your thoughts in terms of people who are not family? Because we talked about family. That's a different perspective than, sometimes I think with family, it's a lot more a heartache and it's a lot more difficult to navigate those things because oftentimes you live with that person that you're in conflict with. Whereas a colleague or a coworker or somebody that you know, a friend or whatever, if you have conflict with them, depending on the relationship, that's a little bit easier to navigate because you're not always around that person.
True, correct.
And yeah, you got to go to work and but you can avoid them. You don't have to, same thing that you're talking about with the sweeping it under the rug. But what's your take on that aspect?
It's to me, I don't have a whole lot of friends. I know a lot of different people, and I'm acquainted with a lot of different people. But it's like there's only certain people that I let into my life. That's just my personality, right? There's nothing that I speak with, because there's a lot of people that have a lot of friends and they're very social and they're constantly with friends, and that's great. But I'm very private in sharing who I am with people, right? Because and that could be for a lot of different reasons. I was hurt. I was a young kid. I was I felt a sense of abandonment and all this stuff. So whatever it is, for whatever reason, is how I am. So I have a very short fuse when it comes to my parameters being crossed, right? So there are parameters in which, okay, well, it's a dance. I'll let you in, you let me in. And we go back and forth. And then it's like, okay. But when I feel like there's a sense of violation, there's a sense of not mutual respect, then to me, it's just easy to cut off. For some people, that's a big challenging, because again, you're talking about identity. And sometimes we identify ourselves by the people that we're around. It gives us a sense of purpose, and a sense of belonging. So you have to be able to understand as an individual who, again, going back to your core values, who you are as a person in relationship to others, right?
Yeah,
and
I
setting
think
those boundaries.
Because if some people, that's important. You have to have your values, right? Your values, especially in conflict. In relationships, you have to have boundaries, period. You and I have boundaries. You know what I mean? There are certain things that I'm okay doing, and there's certain things, no, we said this is what we're going to stick to, because this is what this is it. This is the boundary, right? And it's somebody that I was talking to the other day said it's not necessarily a boundary, but it's something else. And now for the life of me, I can't remember what it is, because it doesn't seem as aggressive or assertive, but it's one of those things that you exercise, right? And but the problem is that, and I'm sort of I don't want to lose my train of thought, but like when you're the person that you are, is you have a value system. And so if somebody violates you in a certain way, disrespects you or whatnot, then it's easy for you to be like, forget them then, whatever. I don't care. And you can move on about your day and you're fine. I operate differently. When I have conflict with a coworker, with somebody that I know that I'm friends with, because I'm like you, I don't really have a lot of friends. I don't want to be friends with a lot of people. It's too much work to have a lot of friends. And the friends that I have understand, not going to be, it's 8:00. Don't even think you're going to ask me to go do something at 8:00 or even 6:00. It's too late. You know what I mean? They understand that we eat dinner instead of dinner, things like that. We have friends that are like that, and they respect that space. But I still get concerned when I have conflict with somebody and I have disruption, and I've had that with certain people. And I'm like, okay, so then there's the two types of conflict. It's the one that's the unacknowledged conflict, one that you just, which is what you're saying, whatever, I don't care, or poorly managed conflict. And there's a difference between the two, because when you have an unacknowledged conflict, I'm just not going to do it. It's suppressed. It's unacknowledged. You just don't do anything with it. But then when you have the poorly managed conflict, when you're venting anger in a way and any time, you can harm the relationship. And so I know that we've had, just to be transparent, we've had some issues with certain family members, and the way that we have lashed out in those moments and on both sides have caused damage or harmed the relationship to an extent, right? And in some cases, those are you can't fix those things. They're not, they're damaged relationships, and there's nothing you can do about them. So you have to be careful about how you manage conflict. And that's where the resilience comes in.
Yeah. Now here's where I disagree with some of that.
Okay.
Right? Because for
you're not
instance,
allowed to disagree.
Because
you're going to disagree anyway.
If something is important to you, and if people are important to you, there's a point in which you have to understand that people are human, and people will make mistakes.
I agree 100%.
Right? And that's the part in which I disagree. So there comes a point
I was going to go into.
Which,
so you just took my thunder, because that's what I was going to say. No, go ahead. It's good that you're saying it, because I wanted to emphasize that.
Yeah.
That there's that perspective, right?
There is that perspective. And
there has to be an element of forgiveness is what you're alluding to.
Because it doesn't hurt. I mean, and again, that's what makes us human. The ability to be able to understand that people make mistakes, right? And you could forgive somebody for that. Now, if they continue to do it, that's a different story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's like the part that bothers me about certain situations like this is that you don't confront the situation. When I say, oh, if somebody does that to me and they're going to do that, I'm like, okay, forget them. You know, that relationship really didn't mean that much to me.
Of course.
But if there's a relationship that I really care about this person, then,
yeah,
I would say, hey, like, what's going on? And like, like, let's talk about this. You know, it's like, I feel this way, man. It's like, I don't understand what's happening. But if those attempts are maybe made, then that's a different story.
And taking ownership for, okay, in the moment, I said something that I should not have said.
Correct.
I mean, we've done, as a married couple, just full transparency, right? We've said things to each other that have been completely disrespectful.
Yeah.
And not even borderline. They've been disrespectful because we're in a marriage. And we have this love affair, and it's not a perfect love affair. And we have moments where we don't agree and that we disagree.
And it gets frustrating.
It gets frustrating. And when we can't make the other, and have we gotten, I mean, we've been together 22 years. Have we gotten better over the years? But we still have room for improvement, because we're still, again, evolving and relationships change. We've established boundaries recently with things that have happened in just this year that have been different than any other boundaries that we've had in the past, right?
Because things need to adjust.
And so understanding those boundaries, respecting those boundaries, and then being able to work through a conflict by being able to acknowledge, listen, I said this, I should not have said it. It was out of line. You know what I mean? Now, some people will say, because there is the quote out there of, you can throw, I don't know, something about if you say something, you can't take it back. I can't remember what the quote is, but basically it's that once you say it, you can't take it back. So be careful what you say. Watch your words, because you change things. And that's true. But then, did that relationship mean anything? If it cannot be resolved and you cannot understand or know what the intent of that person is.
And also, if you are the perpetrator, but can you acknowledge and be, you know what, I shouldn't have done that. You know,
that's what I'm saying. Taking ownership for that.
Taking the ownership for it,
But again, understanding the intention, because there's a lot of things that I say to you and I'm like, but that's not how I meant it. So how can we resolve that?
That is the conversations that need to happen. And those what I call that, you have to confront the situation. Just like the situation you mentioned is my familial situation with my mother, right? And if I wasn't able to do that, even when we were angry at each other and said things, you know, but if I didn't value what she has done, then
or who she is,
or who she is, then it's like, what kind of person am I?
Right.
Right? Because what was the transgression? The transgression is that she loved me so much that she wanted to hold me back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or again, it's like you got to be able to give people the flexibility to be human and grow in their own way if you really care about them. But if you're narcissistic and you're just looking about, oh, this is what they did to me and then that's it and that's it, then it's by Hakuna Matata. You know, go swing your arms on that way.
Right.
You know,
and then you have the other the polarized perspective too, is look at my relationship with my own father. You know what I mean? And I don't want to bash anybody, but the truth of the matter is that I did confront that. I did all the things that I thought I should do. I expressed how I felt. I expressed, these are the situations and this is what I'm feeling and this is what's happened. And that person he chose to be, I don't want to call it narcissism, but definitely a perspective of I'm right. It doesn't matter what you say and I don't care how you feel. And so what does that relationship mean to him? You know what I mean? And that has pushed me away as a result because I have boundaries and I have to exercise those boundaries and parameters in my life in order to maintain my emotional, my mental well-being.
And again, it's like there are situations in which you could try, but and that's the part that's challenging. This is when the challenge comes in, because how do you move forward realizing that this situation is not going to change? How do you accept it? How do you reconcile that? Because the perception is that these people are supposed to love you,
right,
and supposed to care for you no matter what you do, right? But when that doesn't happen, then it's like, okay, well, I'm not worth it. I'm not this. I'm not good enough because the people that are supposed to love me are not. Sometimes you have to make that determination that is like, okay, I get it. I understand it. Now I have to. From the previous episode, I got to clear my vessel, let go of these negative emotions so that I could receive and live from a different standpoint.
So I would say that, and not to make this all about me, but as a personal example, that's exactly where I am.
Yeah.
Because I think what happened with my father is that I confronted it. We talked. It fell on deaf ears. Didn't want to hear it. I did the whole, let me write him a letter, etc. Fell on deaf ears. He feels the way that he does about me. We don't really talk to each other or acknowledge each other very frequently at all. If it wasn't for my mom, we probably wouldn't speak, sadly. But what happened is I confronted it. I did whatever I could. I owned behaviors. I was hoping that he would meet me halfway. But I also knew that I can't make somebody own their behaviors. So I built resilience. And I went through a morning. I went through a period where I was just like really devastated by the fact that I felt all those things you just said. I'm not valued. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't love me. I'm not valuable to him. I'm not worthy. I'm less than. All a range of emotions I went through. Yeah. And you're right. And it's hard to overcome that. But when you overcome those things, and I'm not saying I'm perfect or that I've overcome, but in that situation particularly, the resilience, I've built that up. Okay, you know what? Yeah. This is how it responded to me. Not my problem. Not going to own that. I'm going to move on and I'm going to be okay with that.
And this is a very tough part of the quest, right? Because one of the themes and the motifs that you look on the hero's journey, right, is the quest for the father figure, right? Mm-hmm. And eventually that quest transforms into the quest for yourself. Identifying new values, living from your own set of values, separate from those individuals that brought you up. And that's hard because, again, it's losing your identity, losing the sense of self, but it's like it's a necessary thing to come out on the other side as something different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, on the other side, let's say, we talk about the familial and the caretaker to the caretakee relationship. On the other side, let's say on a professional, typically you have the boss and the subordinate type relationship, right? And those are challenging, particularly when you are, and this is my experience, right? I'm not I don't think so. I'm very self-directed. I do my own thing, right? And so that relationship with the boss and and a subordinate, it's a hard one to deal with because your sustenance, it's tied up to this individual, right? So you might be willing to take more abuse, right? And you might be willing to allow yourself not to be who you are because this is your lifeline, right? Now there are some bosses who are great, right? Who have allowed you to be creative because it benefits them. But leadership, it's really not the norm, right?
No.
Yeah, it's like that type of leadership is really not the norm. It's
Very
really
far and few.
transactional.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So you have to also be in that because you might feel, oh, I had a relationship with this person at work and we work together well and this and that and the other. But sometimes, it's like power is a very intoxicating thing. So you have to be able to understand how that relationship works. I had an interesting conversation with someone, and one of the lines that was very telling to me was the one they said something to the extent, well, I get the final say on what happens. And I was like, cool. I get you. I get it. So that's saying, doesn't matter what you come up with or ideas that you may have. It doesn't matter what, whatever group came up with. I'm the final say so in this. So this, in that perspective, it's like you have to be understanding of like where you are and see what it is that you're willing to give and to share, right? Because that's how it is in a transactional relationship. I mean, if you think about it, it is a transaction. You are giving your talent and your work for somebody that is paying you for them to benefit in whatever it is that they're doing. And you have to understand that. So that's why sometimes sentimentality, you have to be aware of your sentimental aspect because you have to understand that that's the way that they see you, right? I mean, you might want to be seen as something more, something, and and you hope that you are in an environment in which they see the effort, the creativity, and the this and that, but that's not always going to happen.
Not the norm.
And you have to be able to understand that too, and be able to be okay with that,
right?
And figure out outlets or doing other things that are going to get you those type of needs because he may not be in that. Sometimes I feel bad for teachers, right? Like in school, because they may want to teach in a certain ways, but they can't because there are standards. There are certain things that need to be done, and they tell, oh, you got creative freedom, but you got to do this. And there's a lot of things like that you have to be able to understand when you're in that situation. How much are you willing to take? And if you're okay with that, because if not, then you have to start looking at, okay, what else is it that I need to do or where, and this is the beauty about an open market, right? Because you could go to an employer that allows you to be more of yourself, right? In whatever arena. But just gotta remember, it's a transactional. I will give you this, and in return, you will give me that. That's hard, right?
I think most relationships can be transactional to some degree. I mean, when I want to go shopping, I tend to cook you a delicious meal, and I don't get any lip back from you when I want to go shopping. So that's a transaction.
Wow. Wow. Here I am trying to be all serious as though you're talking about like transactions with me and food.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry.
It's but yeah, but those are things that people need to take into consideration, because you have the familial, you have your professional, and that transaction aspect. It's something that you have to kind of like understand. Without the sentimentality of it all. And I was very sentimental. I was particularly because I worked for nonprofits most of my life. And, you think that you're mission driven, right? Because that's one of the big things. But when you start realizing that people interpret things in a completely different way that you do, or that you perceive that it's interpreted in that way, again, going back to understanding things, then that's when rank begins to get pulled. No, and again, this is not victimization. I want to make sure that that's clear. It's understanding that My failure was not understanding that dichotomy of power, right? Like Robert Greene says, not outshining the master. You got to be careful with all those different things because you have to understand the scope of that. And I was very naive to that, to power, because I chose to go into a field that was said that is like it's all about the mission, but sometimes it isn't. So it's just things like that we need to be aware in those type of relationships when it comes to work. And so we talked about family, friendship, work. Anything else that you want to add?
No. I was just letting you say your piece. So just listening. So, but the strategies that we have to share are based on conflict resolution, resolution of those relationships, or strategies for people to use in terms of addressing conflict in their relationships in all those areas. So what's that smile for?
No, nothing.
What's that smile for?
Just smiling.
Mm-hmm. It's weird. You're smiling weird.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
Okay. So we discuss the challenges that we face with people, our loved ones, family, coworkers, friendships, and we have 6 strategies for people to use to assist them in addressing conflicts in these relationships. So if it warrants it, these are awesome strategies for addressing conflict. So, and I think that they're effective in a lot of ways. So the first one is to use I statements, which is your favorite thing. So if you are in an argument with your partner, your spouse, your relative, or even a coworker, try to resist the urge to use use constantly rather than saying you did or you said, which sounds accusatory and forces the recipient to become defensive. Take responsibility for how you feel while identifying how the other party's behavior influenced you. Communication is critical while using this strategy. So that's really important because I tend to, you said this and you did this, and when you did this and that is, I can see how that makes people feel defensive. Yeah, for sure.
Sure. Number 2, be respectful and kind. Relationship conflicts don't always escalate into full-blown confrontations. It's possible to disagree with your spouse without yelling, calling them names, bringing up the past, making fun of them, or downplaying your needs. Keep an eye on your feelings when you talk to your partner or anybody for that matter, and be conscious of them. Your voice may rise and your tone may turn hostile if you sense yourself tensing up. If you notice these alterations, stop and take a deep breath. And this is one of the things.
That was the thing I was talking about, the 0 to 100.
Exactly. This is one of the things that I always kind of like try to preach is be respectful and be kind, and be respectful of the situation, because you may disagree on content, on context, but you shouldn't be disrespectful.
Which is
of
what
the
you
individual.
what you were just talking about with your work environment situation. Like why there's no reason to be disrespectful.
Exactly.
My point of view, and asserting your power is not necessary right here. You know what I mean? We can have a conversation. So listen to understand. An active listener is paying attention and understanding what the other person is saying, not counting down the seconds until it's your chance to speak again. If you and the other party are fighting, you must take the time to comprehend how and why they feel that way. This strategy demonstrates that you are trying to understand their perspective and see things from their point of view.
Nice. Consider timing. When you and your partner or whoever it is are both exhausted, stressed out, or not feeling well, try to avoid discussing conflicts or attempting to fix a problem. Both of you must be in the proper physical and mental state to carry out the talk and arrive at a successful solution. Take a break if you start a difficult conversation and are getting too furious, stressed out, exhausted to continue. And this is actually a good technique, because timing makes a difference.
Yeah.
Because when you see yourself agitated or the other person is agitated, it's probably best just to
definitely
let's just let it die out, walk it down,
and
then come back and kind of like revisit that stuff.
Yeah. I think it will clarity. It clears your mind.
Yeah.
When you walk away from the situation, you can start thinking about, well, maybe I shouldn't have said this, or maybe I shouldn't have done that, so The fifth strategy is to agree to disagree, which we've talked about. So as long as you are not using you're not compromising as a means of conflict avoidance, which is really important, it can also be a constructive method to deal with disagreement in a relationship. You can discover that you and your partner or anybody that you're having the disagreement with have some differences that firmly establish who you are as people. For instance, you might discover that agreeing to disagree is the wisest course of action, and one that allows you to enjoy your differences regarding anything like a matter of taste or preference. That's what I was just talking about. We both have different things that we appreciate. I'm a day person. You're a night person. You know, you like certain foods. You eat dinner at night. I don't eat dinner. You know what I mean? And that's okay. Live and let live. That's a big one.
And finally, when all fails, or to accompany any of the strategies mentioned, seek out a third party such as therapist or mediator. Communicating well is possibly the most crucial skill for managing stress and conflict in a relationship. A therapist or a mediator could be helpful if you're having trouble mastering this skill. You know, that's always like a good idea to get someone in between if the relationship requires it. There's also the point of walking away.
Yeah, and in some cases you have to make that difficult decision.
And in some cases you do have to make the difficult decision.
In both professional and personal.
In both
environments.
Professional.
Yeah, that's important.
And personal environments.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Comment below with your thoughts and additional ideas, and remember to stay connected by sharing and subscribing.